The gavel strikes the bench with a resounding crack, reverberating through the courtroom. Gasps ripple through the crowd, the tension thick as smoke. The courtroom falls silent. At the witness stand, Jenna Parker, the estranged child, no more than 20, trembles, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw everything, she stammers, eyes darting nervously between the jury, her father David Parker, and the judge, Judge Wilson. A juror shifts in their seat, their grip on the armrest tightening. Behind them, a coffee cup tips over, dark liquid spreading, staining the floor. The air is charged, every second stretching like an eternity. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, is now out in the open. And it's about to destroy everything. The room feels colder, as if the weight of the revelation has sucked the warmth out of the space. David stiffens, his eyes locking with Jenna's, an ocean of hurt and betrayal swimming in his gaze. The audience holds their breath, as if time itself has stopped. In that moment, Jenna's testimony could break David, leaving him without a future, without the family he once held dear. The weight of the room bears down on Jenna Parker as she stands at the witness stand, struggling to hold back her emotions. She can feel David Parker's gaze burning into her. She knows what she has to say, but her voice trembles as she says, "I saw it all. He was there." The words sting her lips, each one cutting deeper into the bond she once had with her father. The silence in the courtroom is deafening, waiting for her to speak. The prosecutor's voice cuts through the tension. Catherine Langston steps forward, eyes sharp and focused. "You're sure about this, Jenna?" she asks, her voice dripping with calculated authority. Jenna nods, fighting back the tears. "I'm sure." The words feel like chains, locking her into a fate she never asked for. The room is thick with anticipation, as David Parker grips the edge of his seat, unable to look away from his daughter. The courtroom hums with whispers as David Parker's defense attorney rises to speak. Tom Richards, mid-40s, steps forward with confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've heard here today is a carefully crafted story. But the truth is far more complicated than it seems." David watches, but his mind drifts. The words are hollow, as though the very air is thick with the lies and betrayals surrounding him. There's no escape now. A juror shifts in their seat, unable to hide the confusion written on their face. A coffee cup tips over, spilling across the floor, but the courtroom doesn't flinch. Jenna Parker looks down at her hands, as if they could somehow erase the truth she's just revealed. David can feel his chest tightening, his body frozen in place. The silence is suffocating. The truth has been laid bare, but what will it cost them all? Jenna Parker sits in the quiet of her small apartment, her eyes unfocused, staring at the empty space in front of her. The weight of her testimony presses heavily on her shoulders. For weeks, she's been torn between the truth and the loyalty she once had. But now, in the stillness of the night, the consequences of her decision are clear. Her father, David Parker, had always been her hero, the man who promised to protect her, guide her, and love her unconditionally. But the truth is a blade she can no longer hide behind. She's seen the darkness lurking in the family's perfect image, the things that no one talks about but everyone knows. Her own heart aches as she recalls the cold nights when she sat in silence, watching him. His lies had built the very walls around her, and now they're closing in. Jenna isn't sure if her revelation will bring redemption or ruin, but she knows it will tear apart everything she's ever known. The clock on the wall ticks loudly, marking the seconds until she will have to stand up in that courtroom again. In her hands, she holds a photo of her family, a photograph that now feels like a cruel reminder of the past she can never return to. The next morning, Jenna sits across from David Parker, the father who once seemed invincible. Now their relationship feels like a fragile shell, one wrong word away from shattering completely. She tries to keep her voice steady, but the emotions flood in. "I don't know if I can do this, Dad," she says, her hands trembling. David, in his early 40s, looks at her with weary eyes, the weight of the trial bearing down on him as well. His once confident demeanor has faded into something more fragile. "You have to," he replies, his voice low and strained. The silence between them stretches, thick with unspoken words. Jenna looks away, not wanting to see the desperation in his eyes. The love they once shared is buried beneath years of silence, lies, and now this trial. "I need you to trust me," David says, his voice cracking slightly. But Jenna knows she can no longer trust him, not with her heart, not with the truth. Later that day, Jenna walks through the courthouse, her heart pounding in her chest. The marble floors echo beneath her steps, amplifying her growing anxiety. She's seen this place before. As a child, her father would bring her here, showing her the power he held. Now it feels like a prison. She stops outside the courtroom, her mind racing. She's unsure of whether to go in. She knows her testimony will change everything. But what will it change for her? Will it destroy the man she's known her whole life? Will it bring justice? Or will it ruin them both? As Jenna stares at the heavy courthouse doors, she feels the weight of the choice on her shoulders. Her father's voice echoes in her mind. "Trust me." She takes a deep breath, and with a final glance at the doors, she walks in, knowing there's no turning back now. Inside the courtroom, the tension is unbearable. Jenna sits in the witness stand, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. David Parker stands across from her, his gaze piercing, but Jenna can't meet his eyes. Her mind is in turmoil. She knows the words she's about to say will haunt her forever. But what's more haunting is the look in her father's eyes. The look of someone who knows they're about to lose everything. The prosecutor's voice cuts through the silence. "Did you see your father, David Parker, commit the crime in question?" The words hang in the air like a heavy weight, and Jenna's breath catches in her throat. "Yes," she replies softly, her voice barely audible. The room goes silent. David flinches, and Jenna feels her heart breaking for him. But there's no going back now. The truth is out. Later that evening, David Parker sits alone in his office, staring at a file on his desk. The weight of the day presses down on him. His daughter's testimony has cut him to the core. His mind drifts back to the past, to when things were simpler, before the lies, before the betrayal. He's been a man of power, a man who always had control, but now he's powerless. His world is crumbling around him, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Jenna's words echo in his mind. "Yes, I saw you commit the crime." The guilt begins to settle in, a quiet, gnawing presence that won't go away. He's losing everything: his family, his reputation, and his own sense of self. As the sun sets outside, the office grows darker, the light fading as David picks up a glass of whiskey, his hand shaking as he takes a sip. The tension in the courtroom is palpable. Jenna Parker stands at the witness stand once again, her heart racing as the prosecutor, Catherine Langston, leans in with a sly smile. "So, Jenna, you've claimed to have seen your father commit this crime, but are you sure?" Jenna's mind spins, the words crashing into her with full force. She can feel every pair of eyes on her, and she tries to steady her breath. "I'm sure," she replies, her voice trembling but resolute. Catherine smirks. "So sure that you would destroy your family, your father, with this? Or is there something else here? A personal vendetta?" The crowd murmurs, and Jenna's chest tightens. The question cuts deeper than expected. She can't let her emotions get the better of her. "I'm telling the truth," she says, her voice steadying. But even as the words leave her mouth, she feels a gnawing doubt in her heart. David Parker, her father, sits across the room, his eyes dark and filled with fear. She has been caught in a web of conflicting emotions, but now there's no turning back. Back at the defense table, David Parker listens as his lawyer, Tom Richards, makes a desperate attempt to deflect the growing suspicion. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are dealing with a child who is emotionally distressed. Her words may not reflect the truth," Tom argues. David clenches his fists under the table, struggling to suppress the urge to intervene. It's not the defense he had envisioned, but desperation is sinking in. Tom goes on, trying to piece together a case where David isn't guilty. Jenna's testimony had been damaging, but now Tom was playing his last card, trying to undermine the credibility of his own daughter. David can't bring himself to look at Jenna from across the room. He wonders how she feels sitting in the witness stand, knowing that her own father is now on the other side. We need to show that this is not a case of truth, but of family division, Tom concludes, but David feels no relief. If Jenna is right, he is finished. Later in the trial, an unexpected witness is called to the stand. Victor Mills, a former employee of David Parker. Victor, in his early 30s, steps forward with an air of quiet confidence, his face impassive. Catherine Langston begins her questioning, her voice smooth, but laced with underlying malice. "Mr. Mills, could you confirm that you witnessed David Parker acting suspiciously around the time of the incident?" Victor looks at David, his expression unreadable. "Yes, I saw him leave his office late that night. He seemed nervous," Victor says, his voice calm but steady. David's stomach tightens as Victor's words hit him like a fist. Jenna watches from the witness stand, her face a mixture of shock and uncertainty. She feels the walls closing in. This is the moment when everything could change. After Victor Mills' testimony, Jenna Parker is once again called to the stand. She knows that this could be her moment to clear the air, but doubt gnaws at her. As she stands there, the prosecutor's voice cuts through her thoughts. "Jenna, your father's employee just testified against him. He claims to have seen your father acting suspiciously the night of the incident. What do you say to that?" Jenna looks over at David, who is staring back at her, his eyes filled with a pleading intensity. She feels a deep pain in her chest, but she can't back down. "I know what I saw," she says firmly, her voice breaking only slightly. David looks like he's crumbling in his seat. She knows this testimony will be the final blow, but she has to hold on to the truth, no matter how much it hurts. As the day draws to a close, David Parker finds himself alone in a quiet corridor outside the courtroom. He leans against the cold marble wall, his head in his hands. The weight of the trial, of the lies and the truth, has become too much. Jenna has testified against him, and the evidence is piling up. He knows that the end is near. As he sits in the hallway, a familiar face appears. Sarah Miller, a longtime family friend. She looks down at him with concern. "David, you can't let this destroy you," she says, her voice soft but firm. David lifts his head, meeting her gaze. "It's too late, Sarah. I've already lost her," he whispers. Sarah kneels in front of him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You still have a chance to make things right. Don't give up on your daughter," she urges. But David doesn't know if he can fix what's already broken. The courtroom falls into a stunned silence as the defense calls its unexpected witness. Michael Jennings, a key figure in the company where David Parker worked. He steps forward, his expression a mixture of calm and deliberate intent. Michael, in his mid-30s, takes the stand with an air of quiet authority. "I was close with David Parker, and I have something that will change everything." The room's tension deepens as the jurors lean forward, hanging on his every word. "I know about a document," Michael continues, his voice steady. "A document that was forged." He pauses, letting the words sink in. Catherine Langston, the prosecutor, reacts with shock, quickly regaining composure. David Parker's heart pounds in his chest as he watches from the defense table. He never expected this. Michael reveals that David was not involved in a criminal act at all, but rather he had been set up by someone within his own company. As Michael speaks, David's mind races, wondering how much of the truth is finally coming to light. The courtroom remains silent as Michael Jennings continues, his words like daggers. "I overheard a conversation between David Parker and a colleague a week before the incident. They discussed a forged will, one that was meant to change the inheritance in David's favor." The revelation sends ripples of shock through the room. David's face is a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. He never thought his past could come back to haunt him like this. Michael makes his case even clearer. David had no knowledge of the forged document. It was part of an elaborate scheme orchestrated by his closest confidant, Richard Holloway, a man who had been undermining David for months. As Michael speaks, David feels a wave of nausea. His mind races back to all the people he trusted, and now it seems one of them is responsible for destroying him. With the courtroom in chaos, Richard Holloway, a sharp-dressed man in his early 40s, stands in the back, watching with a cold, calculating gaze. The truth is slowly unfolding, but he knows the damage is already done. Catherine Langston takes control of the situation, redirecting the court's focus. "It seems we have a new angle," she says, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "But this isn't over." As Catherine begins cross-examining Michael Jennings, she tries to undermine his testimony, suggesting that Michael himself may have been involved in the conspiracy. But Michael remains steadfast, asserting that Richard Holloway was the mastermind. The tension in the room continues to rise. David Parker watches from his seat, his mind reeling with the thought that someone he trusted so completely could betray him so deeply. Jenna Parker, seated across the room, struggles to maintain her composure, realizing that her father may have been the victim all along. As the day draws to a close, David Parker stands in the hallway, staring at the ground, his mind spinning. Jenna Parker approaches cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Her heart beats wildly, and as she looks at her father, she sees something she hadn't seen in him before: vulnerability. "I never wanted to hurt you," David says quietly, his voice thick with regret. "I've made so many mistakes, but I never lied to you about this. You have to believe me." Jenna feels her resolve weaken. The truth of her father's innocence, however painful, begins to sink in. She doesn't know what to do anymore. The man she once loved, the man she now sees as guilty, has been manipulated, just as she was. She doesn't know if she can forgive him, but her heart aches at the thought of losing him forever. "I don't know if I can believe you," she whispers, before turning and walking away, leaving David alone with the truth. Later that evening, Richard Holloway watches the final moments of the day unfold from his office, his face unreadable. He knew that the truth would eventually surface, but now that it has, he feels no regret. He made his move, and it's too late for anyone to stop it. David Parker may have been the pawn, but Richard had always been the one pulling the strings. His phone rings, and he answers without hesitation. "It's done," he says coolly, the words a final confirmation of his success. As he hangs up the phone, he looks out the window of his office. The city lights shimmering below, casting a cold glow. But his thoughts aren't on the victory. Instead, they linger on the people whose lives he has just shattered. He's done his job, but he can't shake the feeling that the consequences of his actions are only beginning. The courtroom is suffocating with silence as the defense attorney, Tom Richards, delivers his closing argument. His voice is steady, but underneath, there's a sense of urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here is not a case of guilt but of manipulation. Yes, David Parker was targeted, but not by the person you think. The evidence you've seen, the testimony you've heard, it's all part of an elaborate scheme designed to destroy him." Tom steps forward, his voice rising in intensity. Michael Jennings was only one pawn in a much larger game. The real villain here is Richard Holloway, a man who had everything to gain by framing David Parker for a crime he did not commit. He pauses, looking at the jury, his eyes locked with theirs. "You've seen the evidence of a forgery. The witness testimony has proven it. And now, it's your duty to look beyond the surface. David Parker is a victim. He deserves your verdict. A verdict of innocence." Tom stands there, awaiting the jury's decision, as the weight of his words lingers in the air, thick with uncertainty. The tension in the courtroom escalates as Catherine Langston, the prosecutor, stands to deliver her closing remarks. Her voice is sharp and calculated, each word deliberately chosen to sway the jury. "What you've heard today is a series of excuses. David Parker wants you to believe that he's the victim of a grand conspiracy. But let's look at the facts. He was caught red-handed, attempting to forge a document that would have changed the entire course of his inheritance." Catherine pauses, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. This is not a case of manipulation. This is a man who betrayed the trust of everyone around him, including his own daughter. She turns to Jenna Parker, seated in the witness box, her expression unreadable. "You heard her testimony. She was there, she saw it all. And yet, David Parker expects you to believe that he is the victim. But who is the true victim here? The family that trusted him. The people who believed in him. Catherine locks eyes with the jury. You know what you have to do. David Parker is guilty. After both sides have presented their closing arguments, the room falls into a tense silence as Judge Wilson rises from his bench. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard the evidence. It is now your duty to deliberate and render a verdict. As the jury begins to file out of the courtroom, David Parker's heart pounds in his chest. He looks at Jenna, who avoids his gaze. There's no certainty in her eyes, no sign of the trust that once existed between them. David stands, his legs shaky, and walks to the door of the courtroom. He's alone now, the weight of everything he's lost pressing down on him. Michael Jennings' testimony, Richard Holloway's betrayal, Jenna's damning words, it all crashes down on him. As the door to the courtroom closes behind him, David's mind races with the thought of the verdict to come. Will he be exonerated, or will his life be shattered beyond repair? The jury has deliberated for hours, and now the moment of truth has arrived. Judge Wilson calls the court to order, and the atmosphere is thick with anticipation. David Parker stands at the defense table, his heart in his throat. Jenna is seated beside him, her eyes focused on the floor, her hand tightly gripping the armrest. The foreman of the jury rises and hands the verdict to the judge. Judge Wilson opens the paper slowly, the tension in the room unbearable. Woo, the jury, find the defendant, David Parker, not guilty of all charges, the judge reads aloud. The words hang in the air, and for a moment, time seems to freeze. The relief that floods through David is almost overwhelming, but it's quickly tempered by the sadness in Jenna's eyes. She doesn't smile, doesn't offer any sign of comfort. The bond between them has been broken, and it can never be repaired. The trial is over, but the real consequences are just beginning. David Parker exits the courthouse, his face still numb from the verdict. The cold wind of the evening bites at his skin, but he barely feels it. Jenna follows behind him, her footsteps echoing in the empty street. She doesn't speak, and neither does he. They both know that their relationship has been irreparably damaged. As they reach the curb, David stops and turns to face her. "I'm sorry, Jenna," he says, his voice hoarse. "I've failed you in ways I can never fix." Jenna looks at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with pain. "I know," she says quietly. And then, without another word, she walks away. David watches her go, feeling the weight of the finality of everything. There's no reconciliation here, no easy path forward. The truth may have set him free, but it has cost him everything. The jury has delivered its verdict, and now David Parker faces the aftermath. The relief is fleeting, as he now has to rebuild a shattered life. His past choices haunt him, but today, he has regained his freedom. He feels a deep emptiness, realizing the cost of truth. Jenna Parker walks through the empty hallways of her apartment building. Her heart is heavy with the truth she's lived with, yet no closer to forgiveness. The trial has ended, but it hasn't healed her wounds. She needs time to decide what's next, but that time feels endless. In a small cafe, David sits across from Sarah Miller, a family friend. "I don't know where to start," he admits. Sarah smiles softly, her eyes understanding. "You don't have to fix everything at once, one step at a time." Her words feel like a small glimmer of hope, though the road ahead is still unclear. David stands at the doorstep of his childhood home. He hesitates before knocking, knowing that this moment could either heal or deepen the divide. His hand trembles slightly as he raises it to the door. The past looms large, but perhaps, just perhaps, there's a chance to rebuild. As Jenna watches David from a distance, her heart aches. She can't forgive him yet, but she can't forget their shared history either. She turns away, knowing that someday they might find a way forward, even if it's not today. For now, they must both heal on their own terms. David Parker walks alone through a park, the weight of his past still heavy on his shoulders. His steps are slow, and the air is crisp, but there's a sense of clarity. The future is uncertain, but for the first time he feels ready to face it, no matter what it holds. Jenna Parker stands at the edge of the river, the sound of flowing water calming her mind. She knows the path to forgiveness is long, but as she watches the water, she wonders if, like the river, time will wash away some of the pain. She hopes so. David returns to his apartment. The door closes behind him, but he doesn't feel the isolation he once did. The space feels like a fresh start. He doesn't know if it will ever be the same with Jenna, but he's ready to rebuild his life. Slowly, one step at a time. In the courtroom, David faces Jenna, but this time the silence between them is different. There's no anger, no accusation, just understanding. David's voice breaks as he says, "I can't undo the past, but I'll never stop trying." Jenna nods, acknowledging that the journey isn't over, but a new beginning is possible. David watches Jenna walk away. He doesn't know where their paths will lead, but he's come to terms with the uncertainty. The last words of the trial echo in his mind. Sometimes, healing begins in the quiet moments. And with that he steps forward, embracing the unknown.